Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. United States just pulled off a 1 point victory against South Sudan. Let me say that again. The United States, Team USA team, just pulled off a 1 point victory against South Sudan. I know it's just an expedition match. I know it's just a game that doesn't really matter. But oh my God, it's a lot to take away from this victory for the Team USA. Some positives, a lot of negatives though. But shout out to South Sudan. South Sudan was a 42-point underdog. I'm going to say it again. South Sudan was a 42-point underdog. It took Herculean efforts from LeBron James, from Stephen Curry in that second half, and specifically the third quarter, where Steve Kerr started Derek Wright, Jason Tatum, Anthony Edwards, Bam, and also Anthony Davis, and then really gave them that defensive edge and that punch that they kind of needed. And then he brought in the starters, and the LeBron James really just took over. He reminded folks that he's still one of the top players, not just for the Team USA, but also in the entire world. He was the best player on this USA team today, comfortably. Like, it was very special. It was very phenomenal what I just witnessed, what the world just witnessed. And once again, shout out to South Sudan, because South Sudan just became a country 13 years ago. This is the first time ever. Their first time ever in the Olympics. I'm going to say it again. South Sudan just became a country 13 years ago, and they almost beat the United States, the greatest basketball country ever. They almost beat them in an expedition game. It was very phenomenal. And the thing about South Sudan is just like they had the lead for 23 minutes of the entire game. So that means they were up and controlling the game for majority. And unfortunately, talent kind of prevailed. And I found myself, I was rooting for South Sudan. I was like, yo, this would be crazy. Like, you start watching, it's like getting closer and closer and closer. And then the USA team came back and took the lead. And I'm like, okay, what's really going on here? All right, they're starting to play like what we know, the USA team. But then South Sudan just kept fighting. They just kept crawling away, just kept scrapping for loose balls, offense and defense, loose balls, recoveries. And then it was just like the hustle. They were playing a lot of, when we talk about hustle stats, when we talk about the shot contest and loose ball, offense and defense, loose ball recoveries, we talk about deflections, we talk about setting screen assists. Like, they were doing all that. They were working really hard. And shout outs to them, because it's just like, once again, they just became a country 13 years ago. And Paul Pierce was talking a lot of shit about South Sudan. And he said that he said on Friday that the USA team was going to beat South Sudan. They probably doesn't have any player over 6'3", which is crazy because everybody on their team is over 6'5", except for one player. So that was a crazy statement. And they were 42-point underdogs. They was 42-point underdogs in this game. They lost by 1 point. So shout out to anybody that betted on this game and picked the point spread for South Sudan, because I wish I would have bet, because I would have definitely picked the point spread. Because anytime you see something that's like so crazy to believe, like 42-point underdogs is very, very crazy. But to lose by 1 point after people was talking all that noise, Paul Pierce, and it's crazy because Bo and Bo's father are both like part of that country. So to say that like they don't even have a player that's 6'3" in a roster, which everybody's 6'5" and up except for one player, and then historically they have the most tallest player to ever play in the NBA, from their country, was kind of an asinine statement by Paul Pierce. But that's here nor there. It's just kind of 42-point underdogs. They probably felt disrespected, and this is their first time in an Olympics. This is South Sudan's first time in the Olympics, and they just almost beat the greatest basketball country in the world, and they lost by 1 point. And it brings me back to what I'm saying about LeBron James is still probably the best player on the USA team, and when it matters the most. Because he may not do it when it comes to the first three quarters. But closing time, you still want the ball in LeBron James' hands as he hit the game winner layup. It came from LeBron James. How's that for people that used to question his clutch gene? But also just as a Laker fan watching this, and it wasn't just LeBron James, it was also Anthony Davis. Watching LeBron James play at this age, 39 years old, 23 points, he had like 8 rebounds as well, I believe. And Anthony Davis had like 15 and 10, several blocks. Watching Anthony Davis and LeBron James be the best two players in this game in particular. Anthony Davis has been one of the top players for all of the USA's teams' expedition matches so far. You got to feel – I feel for Lakers fans because these two players are still good enough to win a championship, especially if they're healthy. Anthony Davis just comes in and he really impacts the game defensively and offensively, and he does so many things on the basketball court when we're talking about pick and roll, when we talk about being a lob threat, when we talk about roaming the paint defensively, and then we're really seeing how great he is defensively when he doesn't have to play the center position. When he gets to play like that free safety position at the power forward slot and have another center next to him and able to roam defensively and block shots or alter shots and go from one side of the basketball court to the next, as well as when he gets switched on the PNR and be able to defend the perimeter at a high level, Anthony Davis is a generational defender. He's the best defensive player to me in the world. It's not even close. And seeing LeBron James with the game-winning shot and still being the best player comfortably on Team USA today, when we talk about this game in particular, and a top 3 player in general on their team, on their roster, it's just like you want their front office to go out and pull off a move that's going to allow them to compete for a championship and also allow them to compete during a regular season where they're not constantly having to be a play-in team and basically play a number 1 and number 2 seed each and every year. Regardless of the fact of the matter, if like they did it the following year when they went to the Western Conference Finals and then they were the 8th seed this year and they lost to the Denver Nuggets, which is just a bad matchup for the Los Angeles Lakers. But you still want to put the surrounding pieces around Anthony Davis and LeBron James because it just feels like they're just maybe one or 2 pieces away from really winning another championship. But that's the positives when we talk about LeBron James and talk about Anthony Davis as a Lakers fan, for all my Lakers fans out there and stuff like that, and also just people that are fans of the game of basketball. And this is a beautiful thing for South Sudan. Shout out to Luol Deng because he's been an intricate part in helping grow basketball in that country and also just in Africa in general. So shout out to Luol Deng. He's been phenomenal. And South Sudan, this is their first Olympic tournament like I said, they just became a country 13 years ago. So this is like their first time playing competitive basketball in Paris, and even the fact that they made it to Paris. And when we talk about, they don't even have a stadium. They don't even have a practice facility. They've been going around playing in different gyms, and that just shows you what they are as a country, their heart, their competitiveness, and it's certain things you can't teach. You can't teach heart. You can't teach having that mentality. You can't teach going off each and every day and competing and fighting for something and not worrying about your circumstances. That's what all those players on that team were doing. They had heart, they were fighting, they were competing, and that's why they were in that game and had a chance to win. It was up majority of that game for 23 minutes of the entire game. They were up. And unfortunately, they lost. But the youngest basketball nation in the world, that is South Sudan. We have to give credit where credit is due. And it's just a beautiful story. And I know they didn't win the game, and it would have been more exciting. It would have been the greatest probably upset, one of the greatest upsets probably of all time, because even though it was an expedition match, it was like they were so heavily underdog, 42 points. That's crazy being that 42 points is crazy. But let's talk about the USA team. As I'm watching the USA team, first and foremost, I already talked about Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis needs to start. And I know that Steve Kerr wants Joel Embiid to start. He says Joel Embiid, LeBron James, and Stephen Curry are the only locks for starting for the USA team. And I understand LeBron James, as we clearly saw, game winner today against South Sudan. I understand Stephen Curry, who also was played an integral part in the third quarter with LeBron James, helping carry that torch, carry that mantle in the third quarter and hitting key shots for the Team USA team. So those two, of course, we talking about LeBron James, arguably the GOAT, top 3 all time. If you don't think him the GOAT, we're talking about Stephen Curry, top 10 player of all time, greatest shooter, greatest hybrid guard this league has ever seen. Of course, those two players should be starting and locked, penciled in. But we got another player that needs to be penciled in, and that player is Kevin Durant, arguably the greatest scorer this league has ever seen. He needs to be penciled in when he comes back and he's ready to go full-time, 100% healthy, because he's another guy where at the end of the day, you give the ball to at any spot on the basketball court, he can dominate and he can score. 3-level score, beautiful in every level. And also, it's just like when you have LeBron James with the ball, you have Stephen Curry on the other side, and you have Kevin Durant. That 3-headed monster, for their skill set and their talent, is literally unstoppable because you can't help off of any one of those players, especially with LeBron James still having the athleticism and still having the skill set and the dominance to put rim pressure, even though he's not as athletic as he used to be. But he's old man Bron. He still can get to the rim, and his athleticism was out of this world. Now it's got a little dip, and it's still better than some guys' peak athleticism, and he's still able to get to the rim. So those three players need to be penciled in. But Joel Embiid being penciled in as an automatic starter, and Joel Embiid had 14 points today, and he shot 5 for 6 from the field, had a few turnovers. But this is when we always talk about stats not always matching the eye test. Or when people talk about stats and they'll say, well, he's averaging this amount of points. But then when you watch the game and you're like, yeah, he don't need to be starting. And the reason why I say that about Joel Embiid, and it's not just this game against South Sudan, it's the past other games. He's been getting blown by offensive players on opposing teams. And Joel Embiid is not a slouch defensively. He's able to guard the perimeter at times. But Joel Embiid is working himself into game shape. And that's not what the USA team needs. He can do that coming off the bench. And also, he holds the ball extremely long. He holds the ball extremely long when we talk about the offense messing up the flow. FIBA is different than the NBA. Him holding the ball for 5-10 seconds really messes up the rhythm of the offense and the continuity that the Team USA is trying to run, especially when they're trying to run sets. And I understand Joel Embiid and his threat from the perimeter, but when you're holding the ball 1, 2, 3, 4, it's just like you're messing up the entire flow of the offense, especially if you're not making those shots as well. Like when you're holding the ball for 5 to 7 seconds and you're missing shots and you're messing up the flow of the offense, especially when especially if you're down and you're trying to get back into the game. And also, so many times he gets to the post and he's trying to draw fouls, and drawing fouls is a skill. But at this FIFA, they're not calling those ticky-tack fouls that they call in the NBA. It's a much more physical game. So I look at that for like Joel Embiid and just overall his basketball IQ-ness when we talk about defensively as well and offensively, it's just not there where it needs to be for the FIFA game. And also when he's holding the ball and then they're sending help, they're double teaming him, he's throwing the ball to the opposing team, throwing the ball out of bounds. His passing is not there as well. And even though he improved this past year in the NBA with his passing, for his assist total was the highest it's ever been in his career, his passing hasn't been there for the United States. So you don't want a player that the ball sticks to. See, the difference between having a player that can initiate the offense, like a Nikola Jokic, controlling the pace and dictating the pace and holding the ball, a lot of times they're looking to make the right decision or the right pass, or they're creating opportunities for others. When Joel Embiid is holding the ball, he's looking to really read the defense to seeing if they're going to bring help or not, and seeing what the defense is going to try to do in order to try to score the ball, which is hurting the USA. So you got, I believe you got LeBron James, you got Stephen Curry. I think Kevin Durant, you should be penciled in, but I think Joel B has to come off the bench. I don't know what he has done, what type of pack him and Steve Kerr has that is allowing him to be a guaranteed starter. But these past few games, expedition games, he's been horrible. That my eyes and watching game lets me know that he's been horrible. Regardless of what the stats say, especially this game, 5 for 6 from the field, 80% shooting, 14 points. That doesn't matter because the times where the USA team were down, a lot of the possessions were ending in a turnover from Joel Embiid, the defense coming over, blitzing him making a wrong pass, him forcing up a bad shot, and him just not being the guy that we're used to seeing defensively. So it's going to be interesting, and I feel like Steve Kerr is going to continue to play with a lot of these lineups. I think he's going to continue to possibly every game have different lineups. I don't know how good of an idea that is. Basically, the starting lineups are matchup based. At some point, you want to have some flow. You want to have some continuity. And sometimes this is the best team in the world. Regardless of how people feel, sometimes you got to step whatever role that's going to help the team win. And I understand that all these guys are stars. I understand that all these guys are capable basketball players and can go out and their first options, most of them on their teams, and can help their team win a championship. But sometimes when you're on a team like this, which is a glorified AAU team, you got to accept the role where it may be different than the role you're used to playing. And right now, I feel like Drew Holiday needs to start as well. He needs to be the one to also pencil in, because Drew Holiday, what he does defensively and guarding from 90 feet at times, and he really came in and changed the game defensively and getting after the ball and causing the offensive player to pick up his dribble, forcing turnovers. He's very impactful. He's very impactful. You may want to continue to start Drew Holiday. So I understand while some people may feel like, and I was one of those players, that it was hard for me to accept the role, especially playing AAU, hard for me to accept the role of like, yo, I'm the man. Like, why am I not starting? Why am I coming off the bench? Why am I the eighth man on the team playing AAU? But it was just guys that were simply better for what the team was trying to do, and it was nothing wrong with that. So it may be an ego thing, it may be a pride thing with a player like Joel Embiid that he wants to start and he refuses to come off the bench. Who knows what those talks are like or were with the USA team. But Joel Embiid, it doesn't sound – and it's crazy because after a New York Times article that came out with Joel Embiid having an interview talking about how when they asked him that they feel like any team was a threat to the USA team, he was like, no, I do feel like the talent is better in the world. And, you know, LeBron James is not what he used to be athletically, and he's still LeBron, but – you know, those guys are older now. A lot of these guys are older, so who knows what could happen. First off, that's a very weak mindset to have. And then the same day that article drops, that same person that you were talking about, LeBron James, comes out and shows he's still the best player on the team comfortably for this game, and then goes out and hits the game winner while Joel Embiid is talking about LeBron James is older and his team, USA, may not be as great as everybody's saying them to be. And that just goes to mentality. And I hate to keep harping on Joel Embiid, but it's certain things that I understand that may be considered buzzwords that a lot of people like to throw out, like the word dog, like the word mama mentality, like the word mental toughness or just being tough. He's a tough physical nose player. Sometimes those can be, or leadership. Sometimes those things can be considered buzzwords, right? But at the same time, every time I hear Joel Embiid talk in an interview, it just feels like he has none of those qualities and none of those characteristics, or he possessed none of those qualities, to be honest. And now you got Paul George entering the locker room as well, which is another player that I love. And I love Joe Embiid as well. I love skilled players. Both of these guys are extremely skilled. That's another player that's entering the locker room where people have questioned sometimes his toughness when adversity comes, or having that type of mentality to, regardless of when a situation gets tight, when it's time for you to show up and have clutch moments, can my teammates count on you? Can my coaching staff count on you? Can you go out there and get it done for us? More times than not, that hasn't been the case for Paul George. And most of Joel Embiid's career, it hasn't been the case as well, which is the reason why he hasn't won anything at the highest level other than an MVP award, which is phenomenal, of course. So it's just interesting when we have these conversations, and I just thought that was funny because the same day the article dropped was the same day LeBron James had to come to the rescue for Team USA and basically put that team on his back and carry them to the mountaintop and hit a game-winning shot. So it's the USA. So those are some pros and cons of what I watched and what I seen with the USA team versus South Sudan. Once again, shout out to South Sudan because this story, and it would have been a bigger story if they won, but I want to highlight what they did because becoming a country for the first time in 13 years, they just came a country 13 years ago. This is their first time in the Olympics. They're the youngest basketball nation out there that's competing, and they lost to the USA team by 1 point, and they were up 23 minutes throughout the entire game. I know I said all those things several times in the stream, but that is a beautiful, beautiful thing, a beautiful story. And just shout out to those guys because that's something they're going to always remember. It was a player that got a triple-double as well. And also they had some, Gabriel, who used to play for the Los Angeles Lakers, the little guard out there who I believe got the triple-double. He just put up a highlight tape for against Team USA that he needs to send out to some of these coaches because he may need to be on an NBA roster. He was that dominant. He was that comfortable. He was that guy for that team. Man, I think he was that's the smallest guy on the court. I think he's like 5'10 or 5'11, maybe 6 feet. I don't know. But he's the only player on that court that was 6'5 and under. Everybody else was 6'5 and up on the Sudan team. It also goes back to Steve Kerr and some of his coaching decisions. And I know he made adjustment in the third quarters, and that's how he does in the NBA. When it comes to third quarter adjustments, Steve Kerr is one of the best coaches at making third quarter adjustments in the NBA. But it just seems like when you're going against a team that everybody is 6'5 and up, and 6'6", 6'7", and they're starting these tall wing players and these bigs. Why are you starting three small guards? And I'm not saying small guards in the terms of, Isaiah Thomas or Allen Iverson, small guards when it's like Derek White or Stephen Curry, Drew Holiday, small guards to that stature when you're 6'3" and stuff like that. And you're going up against guys that are 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" on an opposing roster. It's just certain things that I just didn't like Steve Kerr was doing. And once again, I don't know how his lineups are going to be going forward. I know he's going to continue to sprinkle in players here and there until they find the unit that they want to run with come Olympics time next week. But at the same time, it's just like I think he has to find some type of identity for us. Like, we know what the five is going to be. We know what our top other five is going to be as well coming off the bench, and we're going to roll with those guys because you can't play everybody. I know it's the Team USA and everybody's on the roster on that team for a reason, but you can't play everybody. So I'm very interested to see what Steve Kerr is going to implement. But at the same time, knowing Steve Kerr, because the first two quarters he had his hand in his pocket like Darvin Ham on the Los Angeles Lakers, I was like, what the hell's going on? But knowing Steve Kerr, he's kind of stuck in his ways. So I talked about Joel Embiid not needing to start. I talked about Anthony Davis needed to come in and replace Joel Embiid. But unfortunately, Joel Embiid is going to continue to start, even though that these past expedition matches have really hurt the United States, but unfortunately he's going to start. But hopefully Steve Kerr comes to his senses and also locks in Drew Holiday and also locks in Kevin Durant for those starting lineups as well, because once again, Kevin Durant is a player that you can give the ball to and say, take me home, just like they gave it to LeBron and said, bring me to the promised land. And you got three of those guys. And it's interesting. I'm going to wait until the Olympics is over with. But I tweeted something. It was a thread. I made a thread about how enjoy this USA lineup and this roster and their quest for gold, because it wouldn't shock me if this is the last time we win gold in this decade. And it's not because the USA, or it's not because what the people try to pretend like the world is so much closer to the USA and there's so much, and they're bridging the gap like Mark Cuban likes to talk about and always trying to shit on AAU basketball and this and that, where we got guys, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, AAU, prospects, just won a NBA championship playing from the AAU level. So none of that bullshit. But it does concern me because watching this game, when things got tight and the going got tough, it was the old heads taking over, the old heads dominating. And that's great. And that's beautiful. We talk about longevity all the time in the NBA, and these guys are having a longevity. And of course, they can't do some of the same things in their prime that they used to be able to do. But at the same time, it's just like longevity is a product of the league not being as great as it used to be. And that's a conversation a lot of people aren't really necessarily ready to have, because even though this is the most talented this league has ever been, it's also the most easiest to come in and score because of the variety of things for us, the analytics, for us, everybody plays the same, for us, like they're taking out traditional bigs out of the game. It's a lot of different things that a lot of people don't like to talk about. So when we look at this situation with the USA team, LeBron James saved the day. Stephen Curry came in and saved the game. This is only an expedition. And we talk about, 2028, LeBron is going to be gone. Stephen Curry is probably not going to play. Kevin Durant probably is not going to play. So we're looking at those three guys, three top 10 players of all time, aren't going to be there. And I'm looking at this next group of players. Anthony Edwards, I know he's going to be there. He's a dog. Jason Tatum is going to be there. But John Morant probably, Jaren Jackson Jr., Devin Booker. I start thinking about just someone like Cooper Flagg. Like, I start thinking about some of these players and just some of the overall talent. And yes, they'll still be the most talented team and be expected to win. But we were sitting our B-level team in FIBA and we lost. And also, like, a couple years before that, we lost as well. I think when Donovan Mitchell was on the team and stuff. So I don't know. But we'll talk about that when the time comes. Once again, it's your boy, Ma K. Smith. Make sure you go follow me, Ma K. Smith, on all platforms, or AKIS NBA, whichever one you want to type in. I will show up. I'm going to be trying to do these live streams at least once a day, talking about a variety of things. Make sure y'all sub as well. If you have a niece, if you have a nephew, you have a daughter, if you have a son that's anywhere from 5 to or 3 to 10, 11 years old. I have a basketball book called Becoming Basketball that they will enjoy. It tells the history of the NBA, and I'm working on something special coming out soon. So I'm going, man. Peace.